Hello, everyone. As you hunker in your bunker, I want you to stop hunkering in your bunker and get out and enjoy the sunshine. The governor is telling us to get out of the house. Please do it. For your own sanity, get out of the house. Go enjoy some of our 18 hours of daylight. I think we're on the verge of getting near 20 hours of daylight right now. But go out, enjoy it. You go to the national park, drive around the national park because that's a nice place to be. Not every day you can go to Denali, and we want you to go to Denali. And today we're doing something a little different. We are going to do an interview instead of me blabbing about theology all this next few minutes. We have with us a lady named Amanda Blackwood. She is the author of 6 books. And answer everybody else's question, no, I have not written any books. I've written a master's thesis, and I cried over that. I can't imagine what my dissertation is going to be like. We'll see how many tears I shed on that, in which case I'm already crying about it, so we'll get to that as well. As far as social media is concerned, she may be found on, are you ready? Reedsy, Etsy, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Flickr, LinkedIn, Amazon, Blogspot, Instagram, and Yelp. She is a busy individual. I think the last time she counted, she had 18 jobs. I don't understand how her hair is not the same color as mine at this point. Amanda has lived through being kidnapped and I can't even say the word today, trafficked. Aluminum linoleum. I can pronounce words in English, believe it or not. I can say anthropomorphosis. There we go. She calls herself a survivor, but me being the kind of person I am, I'd much rather call her a scrapper than a survivor because she's a fighter. And if you're going to get through life, you got to be a fighter. You can't just lay over and die, which a lot of people are trying to do nowadays. I don't understand that. The will for me to live is extremely strong. I don't know if it's because of my background or why, but nevertheless, I would hate to get in a fight with Amanda Blackwood. She'd probably knock me out. And if you think that human trafficking is not an issue in Alaska, I would beg to differ. It's an issue in every part of the world. In Alaska, let me get this up here where I can read it. We had 349 calls concerning human trafficking from 2007 till now. Out of those 349 cases, 84 resulted in an active case, and there were a total of 181 victims. So far in 2020, we have had 5 victims. Coming from a former cop, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is more going on here than what you realize. If I, a police officer in a town of 2,000, can open up the back of a truck and find 18 people staring back at me, which is different than being trafficked, that's actually being smuggled, then it's happening here too. And we have a responsibility as Christians to fight injustice. Not things we dislike or things that irritate us, but actual injustice, because those are not the same thing. Whenever you have a politician who can go get her hair cut and tell you, well, I'm different than you, that is an injustice. When a politician gets away with the same crime that you would go to prison for, that's an injustice. Someone being trafficked, I can't say it, is an injustice for that individual. And we would like for Amanda to, well, before we let her tell her story, I want you people to donate to this cause. I want everyone to give something, because if you sit back and do nothing, that's doing something. And we want you to be active rather than passive. If you go to our webpage, denalichurch.com, go to partner with us or support us, I don't forget what the tab is, you will find a tab for Tithely. And if you open all that up, it's easier if you download it to your phone. There will be a spot for guest speaker. Click on guest speaker and put the word Amanda in the notes, and we will make sure she gets this money to carry on this fight. because this is a fight that's very important. And if you don't find something to fight for, you'll be overtaken. So with that, Miss Amanda, tell us your story.
Well, it's kind of complex. Since we're mainly touching on human trafficking, I don't want to go into too much detail about my childhood, but it does play a significant role. The majority of kids that are trafficked are people that have dealt with domestic violence and abuse in their own households first. The reason I say that is because more than 80% of the kids that are trafficked by somebody in authority, somebody they trust, and somebody they love. It's usually a family member, a parent, an uncle, an aunt, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. For me, thankfully, that was not my issue, but I did grow up in a very abusive household. I started running away at 15. I was lucky that I made it through my teen years. And when I was 19, I found myself married to a man that I barely knew because I was on the run from a past I had already built. In my efforts to try and get away from him, I had injured myself working, and I traveled down to Florida to go stay with my grandmother, while I got a surgery on my knee. And so there were some kind of twists in the road, and when I ended up in Daytona Beach and hoping for her to come and pick me up from a bus station, she left me there at the bus station. I had nothing but $5 to my name. It was about 10 o'clock at night when the young couple got off of another bus and found me sitting on the curb crying. And they asked me what was wrong, and I thought they were angels. And they invited me to come and stay with them. They had just returned from a vacation to New York. They said that they would give me my own room, and I didn't have any furniture, but I was welcome to stay with them while I got myself on my feet. While I continued trying to find work somewhere, what I didn't know is that they were working on trying to sell me, and they sold me to the highest bidder. My entire life was worth a total of $90. I was very lucky to escape. The guy that they sold me to, he said his name was Esteban. I don't know if that was true. He locked me into a small room with no food, no water, no bathroom, no facilities of any kind. And I had to use all of my strength and all of my smarts to be able to get out of the situation. I grew up watching MacGyver. I have since thanked Richard Dean Anderson for saving my life. He's never responded, but if it hadn't been for that show, I probably wouldn't be alive. I pulled a MacGyver move, and I got myself out of that room. I tricked the guy. And as bad as that was, I ended up homeless for a while. I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't go back to where I had been staying because, of course, they had sold me. I had no family left. They'd turned their backs on me. I had no friends. The only people that I knew were the young couple who took me in. There was no options for me except to live on the streets. So I started working 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at a call center. I was one of those telephone operators. Whenever you used to call in.
Part of our dinner.
Well, whenever you used to call into 411 to ask for a listing, to ask for a phone number, I would be the person on the other end of the line that say, "What city and state, please? What listing?" And I became good at it. But I also became a workaholic. So I was doing that 8 to 4, walking across the street there in Daytona Beach to Sears, where I would start working part-time job. I would work from 4:30 to 10:30. And I was doing all I could just to be able to make enough money, just to get myself fed and to try to get myself back on my feet. Nobody knew I was living on the streets. I befriended a security officer there at Sears who allowed me to come and stay with him and his 2-year-old son as a live-in nanny of sorts. I was watching the kid overnight, and he would allow me to borrow the car when he was around so I could go and deliver pizzas. So I was working even while I was sleeping. For this brief time, I worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This family, his mother lived in Colorado, of all places, which is where I am now. She came out to Florida because she was going to help them move to Colorado. She decided after 2 days on this road trip that she didn't like me very much. So they left me on the side of the road in Ohio, and I never saw them again.
Sweet.
I had to call my ex-husband, who was abusive. He wasn't my ex-husband yet at the time because I couldn't afford a divorce. I was doing all I could just to survive. And he purchased an emergency plane ticket for me to go back to him. A sexual assault occurred, and I ended up pregnant. And my son will be 20 this year. This is something I don't talk about very often for obvious reasons. But I haven't seen him since he was 9. My ex-husband took him away from me. So fast forward a number of years, I'm finally starting to do well. I'm finally starting to get on my feet. First time in my life. I have my own apartment. I don't have roommates. I don't have to depend on the kindness of somebody else. I am standing on my own. And I work my way up through the ranks from being the bottom man on the totem pole to being director of public safety and security for 6 different properties in LA County when I was living in California. And I gave it all up for love. I knew somebody for 7 years. I'd known this person. He lived in Scotland, and we talked. All those years, I watched his little girl grow up. Occasionally, we would lose contact. He was a police officer. He seemed safe. So finally, in 2010, towards the end of the year, he gave me the invitation to move to Scotland to go and be with him on a fiancé visa. So we made plans. I was going to move to Scotland and go be with this man for the rest of my life. I was going to finally have that happy ending. I was going to finally have a loving family. So I got on the plane January 10th, I believe, 2011. I wasn't there 2 days, and he'd already taken away my money and my passport. And I learned that in Scotland, most of the doors have a key lock on both the inside and the outside of the door. And for 5 months, I endured first mental torture and abuse, and then physical, and eventually sexual trauma. I was raped by hundreds of people that I don't know and never knew. And there's so much of my time there in Scotland that I have completely blocked out of my memory because of how severe it was. And I've been working for the last couple of months now with a therapist and trying to bring all this up to the surface. And of course, you'd mentioned that I've written books. I'm working on trying to get my time in Scotland out on paper, because that's my way of being able to release any kind of past trauma that I've lived through, getting it out and putting it out in detail and reliving it one last time, and finally having it in front of me so I can let go. I can push it away from me. Here, this is what it is. This is my ball of pain, and it's no longer living in here because now it's in your hands, and you can learn from it and you can do something with it. It hasn't all come out yet, but I was there for 5 months. At one point, I had the days counted. That's how severe it was. I nearly took my life several times. I remember one day in particular, I walked out to a churchyard. And it was a beautiful old church. It wasn't very often I was allowed to go outside on my own, and I felt like I had the option to really run away. There was nowhere for me to go. But I sat on the steps of this church, and I prayed for hours. And I begged for somebody to come and find me, and nobody found me. Nobody came. So I went into the graveyard, and there was a headstone of somebody who died in the 1700s. And I sat there, leaned up against the headstone, and I talked to a total stranger 6 feet under the ground. And that was my only friend. And when I got up to walk back to the place where I was staying then, I can't call it home. It was never my home. And when I got up to walk back, I made a detour to the train station. And when I went to the train station, I was a smoker at the time. I had 1 cigarette with me. And I decided that was going to be my last cigarette. And I asked a man for a match because I didn't have a lighter. I wasn't smart enough to bring one with me. And he produced a matchbook that only had like 3 matches left in it. And I lit my cigarette and I tried to hand him back the other 2 matches. And he says, no, I don't need them. You can go ahead and keep them. And I told him, I said, I won't need them ever again either. And there was something in his face that told me he knew exactly what I meant. And then his little boy, little 3-year-old, came running around the corner. His mom was there. They were a little bit slower than the dad. And I saw that 3-year-old, and that changed my mind. I knew that I could not throw myself in front of that train to take my own life and traumatize a little 3-year-old child for the rest of his life. And he looked so much like my own little boy. It was the moment that changed everything for me. I knew then that I wasn't going to get away by conventional methods. I wasn't just going to kill myself and make it all go away. And, it would all be better if I was gone, because that's not the answer. Life does not get better if you're not there. Life just doesn't exist if you're not there. And that is the coward's way out. And I'm not a coward. So I picked up what I had of my strength left, and I went back there to where I was. And I wrote a poem in my head on the way back. It's here in my room. I'll probably never share it with anybody, even though I've published an entire book of my poetry. That one is private. That one is special. That's the poem that really kept driving me onward. I kept on reciting it to myself in my head every single time I was going through some kind of a rape crisis right there in this place where I was supposed to be living. At one point during my stay there, I did actually get into a computer, and I did purchase an emergency plane ticket with what money I had left in my bank account back in the United States. And unfortunately, I ended up with a kidney infection so bad it nearly killed me, and I couldn't get to the train station, and that was the rest of the money that I had left. So everything was gone at that point. And the kidney infection was a direct result of the physical stress and the trauma and the rape. I was really lucky to survive. I had to pretend to have Stockholm syndrome, which actually had started to take place. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Stockholm syndrome is, it's where you develop feelings and emotions for your captor, for your abuser, because that's the only person that you're around. And you would do anything to please them because it means that they will hate you less. It means that they will hurt you less. If you can get them to like you, if you can get them to love you. And you do anything for that, including loving them. But I had to trick him. I told him, it's June. We're not married yet. And if I don't get married within 6 months of my visa, if they find out, I'll get deported and I'll never be allowed back into Scotland. But I know you're not going to marry me. I know that's not what you want to do, and that's okay. So I have a plan. Next month will be 6 months. July. But if you send me back now, 6 months from now, I can return. I can come back in time for Christmas and for my birthday, and we can spend the holidays together. And wouldn't that be amazing? It'd be our first actual holidays in person together. Wouldn't that be wonderful? 2 days later, he bought me a round trip air flight to get home. He sent me back to California with a return flight for December 8th, 2011. And that ticket, that return flight ticket, and all of the amazing adventurous things I did that year that I got back, that kept me alive, that kept me from killing myself, from all of the memories and all the trauma that I'd been through, all of that stuff hangs in a shadow box on my bedroom wall to remind me every single day of why I'm still here. It's right next to my door, so I see it every time I'm walking in and out. I'm lucky to be alive. Less than 2% of all human trafficking victims ever survive, and I did it twice.
Correct. That's why you're a scrapper rather than a survivor.
Definitely a fighter. Was bred into me.
So, what other crimes do you think human traffickers could be arrested on? Should they be called police? Have police be called on them? That's the word I'm looking for.
Well, I mean, statistically speaking, human trafficking usually goes hand in hand with drug use. Um, Drugs are often a way of controlling the victims. You know, they can get one of their victims, especially one of the young ones, addicted to drugs, and then the kid then believes that, you know, the police are out to get them because they're on drugs or because they're doing something illegal like prostitution. And they believe that this trafficker is the only place where they can get their fix. And of course, there's a chemical change that happens in the brain where they actually physically need this drug. That would probably be my number one guess that people would be able to arrest traffickers for. Of course, you had mentioned human smuggling, which is a big deal. There's drugs, there's other crimes such as breaking and entering, because a lot of times that's also kind of goes hand in hand.
In what businesses or industries within a community might trafficking be occurring?
Massage parlors, nail salons. A lot of people don't think that their nail salon, their local nail salon right down the street, can possibly be trafficking people. But you know, there's some payback that these people owe for having been brought to the United States, and they are forced to work strange long hours. I have been witness to human trafficking events in restaurants and stuff in California where they were forced to work in kitchens and then forced to live in the basement of somebody's home, usually the restaurant owner. There's a lot of different businesses that would be involved with human trafficking. There's very, very few that are completely immune to not having that issue at all. It's pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, we dealt a lot with it with major sporting events.
Yes. Yep. We deal with that out here. It's there's a massive spike in human trafficking occurrences during the National Western Stock Show out here too. You know, we have these people that bring in their animals from all over the country in order to show them off. And Denver's a huge display for all of this. We get all these people coming in here from all over the nation. And we also get these victims of human trafficking that are brought in that are in the same hotel rooms year after year. The hotel industry knows about it.
So who are the traffickers? What do they look like? How do they behave?
Well, Robert, the man in Scotland, looked like a fairly normal person. Sandy blondish brown hair, blue eyes, about 6 foot even, kind of nondescript. Average. He was a trafficker. Esteban was Cuban. He had dark skin, complexion, very handsome, very good looking guy. He was a trafficker. My very dear friend, we'll call her Hope, I don't give out her real name, she was trafficked when she was 4 years old by her stepfather. That's what a trafficker looked like to her. It was somebody that she trusted. It was Adam and Jenny, when I was 19, the young couple that sold me to Esteban. Young, average American-looking couple. Blonde-haired, blue eyes, brown eyes. They look like you and me.
They look nothing like Boris and Natasha off Rocky and Bullwinkle, in other words.
No, they do not. And they do not look like bad guys. They do not wear masks of bandits. Well, I mean, they might right now. It's that time of year. But they don't look like thieves. They don't look like bank robbers. They look like your mom or dad.
What kind of methods do they use to get people? I mean, we always hear the story of the white van. We used to call them Kidnapper 3000s when I was a police officer. Drive up beside them on the side of the street, throw a black bag over their head, and yank them in and drive off. That's what they tend to think of.
That is so rare. It's so incredibly rare. I see stories like this on social media all the time of somebody saying, well, I was followed through a grocery store and they tried to kidnap me in a van. I don't know how many of those I can actually believe, because there are so many of those stories out there of people that are looking to try. I can see where their heart is. They're wanting to bring awareness to the situation, but they don't know that what they're doing is actually causing more damage. You know, they're making up an instance and trying to bring up the statistics the truth is that so many of the trafficking victims, like I was mentioning, they are taken by people that they know, by people that they love. It has everything to do with how they can be emotionally manipulated and nothing to do with how they can be randomly picked up off the side of the road.
I was the father that always sat on the front porch with a shotgun while his kids played in the yard.
Yeah.
That was due to experience of dealing with human beings as a police officer. And that's kind of a bit of an exaggeration because actually the shotgun was inside. But
But
nevertheless,
you are.
I watched my children like hawk.
Yeah.
And when we begin to talk about taking someone against their will, what are some of the red flags or signs that someone is possibly being a victim of human trafficking?
A big one would be somebody who's not willing to show, especially for a young kid, not willing to show their social media page, their social media messaging, text messaging in their cell phones. These are huge. From what I understand of the statistics, 9 out of 10 boys and 6 out of 10 girls have already viewed pornography, hardcore pornography, by the time they're 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major statistic, but what a lot of people don't realize is that within that statistic is kids that are sharing pictures of their own bodies that are later being blackmailed for those pictures. I'm going to show this to your mom and dad if you don't go over here and do this thing that I'm telling you to do. That's a form of manipulation, and that is often the beginnings of human trafficking. You have to do this or you're going to get in trouble because this is your fault.
If we suspect someone is being sold or victimized, who do we contact?
There are anti-trafficking organizations all over the world. In one of my books that I actually just redid, there is at least one organization listed for every single state. There are multiple international organizations that are listed. There's always somebody to contact. And if you cannot find an anti-trafficking organization, contact the police and go into detail. Keep track of everything, keep records of everything, write down what you see, take pictures of it if you can. We've all got smartphones, well, almost all have smartphones these days with photo taking capabilities. Take pictures of license plates, of the person's face. Take track of what it is that's giving you that sense that there's something not right.
In Alaska, the phone number would be 907-375-6409. That's to the state troopers. And then the 800 number is 888-373-7888. Or you can text the word help to 233-733. And I will post these at the bottom of the video whenever we get through playing the video. How can we prevent this from happening in our towns, our neighborhoods, our cities, our families, or even our state?
Education is key. Right now, there are so many people that are terrified of scaring the children with stories of the boogeyman. When I was a kid, the story was stranger danger. What people don't realize is that now it's come so much closer to home. Because these strangers are pretending to not be strangers. They're pretending to be friends through social media, through family ties. They are your next door neighbor. They are your brother, your sister, your uncle, your aunt, your grandfather. They are people everywhere. You have to have this communication with your kids. You have to have this education with your kids. It can't just be, tell me if somebody touches you wrong. It has to be, tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me what you're up to. Tell me what you and your friends did last night when you hung out until 8:30 and it was almost dark outside. You have to have that kind of communication.
So basic responsible parenting.
Yeah.
It's very sad to say that nowadays, but common sense really isn't so common anymore.
That's very true. And a lot of times what I'm seeing with a lot of these young victims that are being trafficked is that their parents don't want to be parents. They want to be friends with their children. And that's not going to help the kids at all. You know, a friend is not going to ask you to show them your Facebook Messenger feed or your Instagram Messenger feed. A parent should.
For those people who have experienced this, can you tell them about any programs out there, whether they be law enforcement or government or private programs, that has helped you through this in the long run?
I haven't had a lot of experience with police programs, but I do know that there is an FBI task force that actually did help me. This last year, the man in Scotland actually posted a bunch of photos and videos of me being raped by strangers on multiple pornography websites. It pretty much destroyed my life. I lost my job. I lost respect for myself. But the FBI task force was there for me, and so were several of the local organizations out here. I work with one called Covered. It used to be Covered in Feathers. It's now Covered. I'm actually a leader of a group of survivors out here in Colorado. And normally, under normal circumstances, we meet once a month and we have this sense of community amongst us where we do crafts and have fun. And it's amazing. We don't have to talk about our past. We all know what the other person has been through because we actually have been through it before. But it's interesting that we don't feel judged in that room, whereas every other room that we're ever in, we will always feel as though we're being judged for our past. Another one is Shift. Shift Freedom was incredible with me. The founders of both of these organizations, they're actually very dear friends of mine now. One of them actually just recently helped me to move, the guy from Shift. His name is John. John has been incredibly helpful. He and his wife sat down with me and said, okay, this is what you're going through. What can we do to help? Yeah, and that's what people like me need. We need to know that we're not alone. We need to understand that somebody out there, whether we have family or not, somebody out there is in our corner wanting to help us, wanting to fight for us, and to help to see us through whatever it is that we're going through. Covered has been great. Shift has been great. I don't know where I'd be without these guys.
Which reminds me of how we actually met, was the photo shoot for Redhead Unite.
Yes.
Some people from my church were very kind to volunteer for that. And my daughter was one of them. She enjoyed it immensely. And I was glad to be a part to be able to help, because once you take off the uniform and the badge, it's a major crisis identity. Identity of crisis, I don't know what you call it. I'm not a psychologist. Glad I'm not. It might be a bad world for me to be in. But I was glad to be able to find something I could do to help people in a tangible way. And with that in mind, what keeps you going day to day? What inspires you?
Gosh, knowing that I'm not alone. For a long time, I felt like I was the only person that had been through something like this, and I was the only person who would ever understand my own pain. But now I understand that no matter how bad I've had it, others have had it worse, and none of us are alone because we all have each other. They've been very, very helpful to me. This little group of survivors, even though I'm one of the leaders of this group of survivors, those little survivors lead me. They help me. They guide me through. They check on me and ask me how I'm doing. Send me messages and text once in a while and pictures of their animals or whatever. And it's just this community. It's a sense of community. I don't have family. These guys have become my family. And when you don't have anybody in your life, having somebody there means the world to you.
It really does. Tell us about your books.
Well, the one about my experience with human trafficking when I was 19 is called Detailed Pieces of a Shattered Dream.
I own that one.
Okay. Thank you. Every penny of sales from that book goes to local organizations that help fight human trafficking. Goes directly to Shift, goes directly to Covered. It goes to these groups out here that are making these efforts to rescue people and to educate them. Then I've got The Miller Miles, which is kind of a prequel to Detailed Pieces of a Shattered Dream. It's about an experience I had when I was 17 years old and running away from home with a group of other people. And it does show how my mindset was starting to be framed for going down a very dark road and possibly leading to human trafficking. I witnessed a relationship between somebody who was over 20 and a 13-year-old little girl and thought at the time that it was perfectly normal. Yeah, it was a difficult time. Then I have 30 synchronized woodpeckers, which is all the funny it's all the funny stuff that happened my first year on the job as a flight attendant. I did that for 2 years, 3 months, 28 days, not that I was counting. Loved that job. And then I've got Twisted Fate, which is a collection of poetry that I wrote during my recovery from human trafficking. Almost everything that is in that book was written once I returned from Scotland and was trying to pull my through the dark times. But just recently, as of April 10th, I published number 5, which is called The Shack in the Woods. It's another kind of chronicle about my time as a teen, and it talks about the abuse that I was suffering and how I was dealing with that and how I kept on running away and trying to find my own place in the world and to figure out who I was and how I learned to have a backbone. And finally, number 6, it is available for pre-order for Kindle. It will be officially published on November 1st of this year. It's called The Unlikely, and it's actually my first work of fiction. It's a post-apocalyptic book that's based on modern-day society. And what I keep saying is, who better to predict the end of the world than somebody who's already lived through it?
Is there anything that you'd like to add before we end all this fun stuff?
Yeah, you'd mentioned something about the Redheads Unite book. This is something that is still very close to my heart. I had hoped to have it published sooner than now, but I am still working on it, and I'm not giving up, so don't give up on me.
Hey, I can do to help. If I find some more redheads, I'll be shooting them.
Hopefully with a camera.
With a camera, yes. Which that's become, anyway, it's almost as bad as my book addiction. Not
I can see.
Yeah. Yeah. My book's probably is worth as much as my truck.
Wow.
Yeah. But I go terminal in 3 more years. You ever want to have, well, I've already been named. Someone on our church board has decided that I shall be deemed and called Doc Fergie. And so that's already been decided. And I'm like, I haven't graduated yet. And so, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I want everyone to donate to this cause. I don't care if it's as little as $10. You can't go to Rose's and eat for less than 15 or 20. So skip a burger, give some money, go to our webpage at denalichurch.com, go to the place where we donate, and go to click on special guest and put in the notes the word Amanda, and we will make sure she gets the money and does with it what needs to be done, because she's fighting the good fight, people. She's out there taking the slings and arrows while we sit here in Alaska in the shadow of Denali, and she's in Colorado with all the warm temperatures and all that other fun stuff. We still have snow on the ground.
Oh, sorry.
Piles of snow. I'm happy to mail you a box of snow if you'd like.
Well, we just had our last snow in I think the weekend of April 20th. It was a blizzard. It was a really, really nasty, like 9-inch snowfall out here. So, I mean, it's bad for us. I know that sounds like not a whole lot to you up there in Alaska, but that was pretty bad for us.
And with that, everybody, I want to say, have a good one.
Oh, the God who made the stars is the God that made your heart, and He's holding you right now. He can heal the broken parts and make beauty from the scars, beautiful scars. You're beautifully broken. You can be whole again. Even a million scars